And about the concentration camps, well, these days the audience has become rather nervous. After watching the confessions of the ghoul at the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum, the ghoul, who directly quoted Hitler about the German soldiers' boots, saying, "Wherever our soldiers' boot steps, there is Germany." But of course, he was talking about the Russian soldiers' boot and about how now, with the help of these very boots, the borders of the state will be determined. And the audience, after hearing and seeing all this, is of course in a daze, sniffing ammonia to stay conscious. But for sensitive people, those raised with classical notions of good and evil, crime and punishment, of course, it was not advisable to watch Putin's performance at the SPIEF. There, the old ghoul suddenly decided to poison the world with his revelations. But in the familiar genre of the Russian national idea, we'll kill everyone, we'll rob everyone just the way we like it. But nothing new. But he really did manage to give all sorts of fools a good scare. Just imagine if Chikatilo back in his day had held press conferences, he would have gotten the public used to this kind of spectacle. And Putin wouldn't have hit people's minds so hard as he did at the SPIEF. And just imagine, really, imagine Chikatilo as the victor, holding a press conference, happy, flowers, the press, trembling police officers, Chikatilo signing autographs for fans and reporting, well, yes, I keep cutting successfully, steadily moving deeper into the city, mastering new districts. And the audience erupts in applause in response to his remark. Then Chikatilo says, well, I worked on Koshuva Larissa since 62. And he describes how he started cutting her open and how he skinned the mother of 3 children alive. And there is a long, thunderous round of applause. And when one of the reporters asks, well, dear comrade Chikatilo, do you have any plans for Kuprina Olga, born in 66? Chikatilo lazily replies, well, not specifically, but I could gut her, spill her guts, and so on. And the response is a storm of prolonged applause turning into an ovation. What I just told you is a retelling of how Putin's remarks, his promises, and his stories about his creative plans sounded. He said, well, the city of Sumy in Ukraine, well, it's not on our immediate agenda, but we could also butcher, wipe out, and demolish that little town to hell. And in response, there was a burst of applause from the audience in St. Petersburg, from the whole of the Economic Forum. Everyone was enthusiastically clapping their hands, Dovankov, Gref, Sobchak, and the entire elite. Absolutely everyone. There wasn't a single person not applauding. In general, the secret of Putin's popularity lies, of course, in his absolute resonance with all the deepest aspirations of both the people and the elite. Of course, some were clapping out of fear, because to sit and not clap would have been a death sentence. Naturally, everyone there was watching each other and keeping tabs. So, well, it doesn't matter for what reason a person becomes an accomplice to a crime, out of cowardice, out of meanness, because of a criminal nature, or out of a desire to steal and kill. What difference does it make? He is still an accomplice, and it's not the ravings of the Kremlin ghoul, but the enthusiastic applause in the halls, unfortunately, that proves Russians have become some completely unique form of life, a special variety of homo. Biologically, no. Biologically, they are, of course, no different from other people. But their culture, their faith, their fabricated history have, after all, raised them as special beings. And so applying normal human concepts to them is pointless. This nonsense from Putin about Sumy. Why the hell do they need Sumy? The only use for Sumy that they can come up with, if let's say, though it's absolutely unrealistic, but if, let's suppose, they do capture this city, the only use for Sumy is that Putin and Patrushev wrap themselves in sheets and play the Canterville ghost among the ruins, scaring each other. Understand, the area of Sumy is about 100 square kilometers, twice the size of Bakhmut. and together with the entire agglomeration, almost 400,000 people lived there. The orcs already tried to storm Sumy in 2022 and were driven out and expelled from there rather quickly. So in order to turn it into, well, theoretically, of course, if the Russians concentrate the majority of their forces there and start receiving maniacal orders from their headquarters, then, well, theoretically, that's war. Theoretically, anything is possible, although all absolutely independent sources claim that Sumy is safe. Well, if they capture Sumy, then compared to the losses, for example, in Bakhmut, which is a much smaller townland, back then Ukraine didn't know how to fight the way it does today. Well, that would probably still be a pretty high price. 120, 130,000 Russian corpses and a completely destroyed, very large city that Russia absolutely does not need and that cannot be rebuilt. And in general, this advance that Putin is talking about, this advance towards Sumy, in addition to its cost in corpses, has another very important price. In order for the Russians to advance, they would have to commit roughly, well, at least 1,000 serious war crimes and countless minor ones. In other words, the price of advancing is always a dose of shame that is recorded, a shame that will be brought to account. But honestly, all this talk about Sumy is unclear. Why has this ghoul suddenly gotten so fired up and started celebrating victory? I don't know who is reporting to him or what they're telling him. And the Ukrainian armed forces have launched a counter-offensive and have already retaken some village. Sumy is absolutely out of reach for the Russians, even if they mobilize another 200,000 or 300,000 people. And it's clear in general that the much vaunted Russian offensive is stalling.